321, 321, live stream check.
Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. I'm Martin Warnes, I'm Chair of Planning Committee and I will be chairing the meeting. To begin with, there are a few housekeeping matters. Action in event of an emergency. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall by going down the main stairs or the back staircase or the high street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Runwald Street. This meeting is being live streamed to the council's YouTube page and will be available after the meeting. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, and would participants please mute their microphones when not speaking. So, introductions on members of the committee and officers, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves starting from my left.
Good evening, Councillor Mark Corey for Wivenhoe Ward, substituting last minute for Councillor Sam McCarthy and hoping to deputise for you, Chair, tonight.
Councillor Chris Pearson, Labour Councillor for Beerchurch, substituting, I believe, for Sam McLean.
Councillor Julie Young, Greenstead Ward, subbing for Kayleigh Rippingale.
Councillor Jackie McLean from Markstown Lair Ward.
Councillor Lee Tate for Prettygate Ward.
Councillor Catherine Spindler from the Saints Ward.
Councillor Tracy Arnold from Stanway Ward.
Councillor Mark Gocher, Castle Ward.
Councillor Robert Davidson, Merzion Payfleet Ward.
Councillor Carl Powling, subbing for Will Carvery.
Philip Morton, Planning Officer.
Daniel Bird, Planning Officer.
Kelsey Oliver, Planning Officer.
Nadine Calder, Principal Planning Officer.
Simon Gans, Joint Head of Planning.
Owen Howell, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. If necessary, we will take a break at 7:30 p.m. and every 90 minutes thereafter. There are toilets on every floor in the building and an induction loop in this room. Whilst determination of a planning application is not a quasi-judicial process, unlike certain licensing functions carried out by the local authority, it is a formal administrative process involving the application of national and local policies. Reference to legislation and case law, as well as rules of procedure, rights of appeal, and an expectation that people will act reasonably and fairly. All those involved in these decisions should remember that the possibility that an aggrieved party may seek judicial review and or complain to the Ombudsman on the grounds of maladministration or of a breach of the authority's code. So I'll move on to item 2, substitutes. We have apologies from Sam McLean and William Caverly, and Councillor Kayleigh Rippingale and Councillor McCarthy. Notified substitutes are Councillor Chris Pearson for Sam McLean, Councillor Carl Powling for Cavalry, and Councillor Julie Young for Rippingale and Councillor Corey for Councillor McCarthy. Councillor Corey will be acting as my Vice Chair this evening. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any? Councillor Tate.
I don't have a declaration of interest, but on the previous note, I would just like it noted that Councillor Calvey is here. It's just that the councillor hasn't been able to provide training as yet, and so I would like that marked on his attendance that he hasn't missed the meeting, he just hasn't had the training as yet.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thanks. Yes, that is the case. Although he will need to be marked down as not in attendance as a member, he'll be marked down as in attendance as a visiting councillor. That's okay.
Lovely, thank you.
Councillor Davison.
Just to note, I'm a member of the Colchester Civic Society, but hold no posts there.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands, so I take it there's no other declarations, so we'll move on to item 4, urgent business. There are no urgent items. So on to item 5, have your say. If anyone has a petition they wish to present to me or on any of the items on the agenda this evening, please do so now. Moving on to item 6, minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of April 2025 are before the committee for confirmation. Are there any points of accuracy that needs to be raised? Okay, and so could I have a proposer and seconder to accept the minute? Proposer Councillor Tate, seconded Councillor Davison. All those in favour? Thank you, that's passed. Okay, move on to, we're going to take item 8, okay, and that is the Abro development. We'll take that before we take the items on item 7. And during the meeting, we will take item 8, which is confirmation of the recent changes of the planning policy framework. And item 7.1, which is 292 Ipswich Road, and item 7.2 Broome Grove, Wivenhoe, and item 7.3 the Albert Cowdrey Avenue, and item 7.4 lamp columns on East Street and Brook Street. And more detail will be revealed when we get to each item. So item 8 is basically confirmation that the recent changes to the National Policy Framework would not have altered the committee's decision proposed by Abro, by the proposed development on Abro development site Flagstaff Road, and it's recommended for approval. And I'll ask Simon to give a preamble, and then Nadine Calder will then give you the detail. There are no public speakers against, and there are no public speakers for, and no visiting councillors. Simon.
Good evening, Chair, members. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to bring this item back to committee. As members will probably recall, or those who sat on the committee previously, this matter was previously considered at 3 meetings last year, namely October, November and December, with a resolution to refuse being made in November and a further reason for refusal being added to that resolution at the December meeting. So this evening you aren't being asked to change that resolution. That stands, and indeed is currently the subject of a planning inquiry which will shortly commence. The reason for tonight's report is to seek clarification from the committee with regard to 2 fundamental points. The first relates to, both of these points relate to, or the first point relates to changes to the National Planning Policy Framework back in December last year, and the second to the interpretation of the policies on which you refused the application. So turning to the first point, this relates to changes to the NPPF, in particular 2 particular points. The first relates to paragraph 11D, the presumption in favour of development, and this is engaged in this instance because the Council, for the purposes of this appeal only, has agreed that it cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and consequently the tilted balance is engaged. As part of that consideration, the wording of that paragraph changed in the December iteration of the framework to require a strong reason for refusal, emphasis on the word strong, being required as opposed to simply the previous wording which required a clear reason for refusal. The second point with regard to changes to the framework in December relates to paragraph 125 in relation to brownfield land. This is a previously developed site which still has a great many number of buildings on it, and the paragraph states that development should be approved unless substantial harm would be caused, and that is the second matter in relation to the amended wording of the framework which you're required to make a decision on, namely whether you consider that the harm that you identified and on which the refusal was based is substantial. And finally, the second point for consideration by you this evening relates to whether the reference in your reason for refusal concerning Strategic Policy SP7 carried with it a conclusion that a conflict also in default existed with regard to the related design policy DM15 in the adopted local plan section 2. And that is, I think, the summary that I will now hand over to Nadine to answer any questions from the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, is there anything you wish to say first? Right, okay. Any questions, if you could indicate to my Vice Chair, and he will tell me who wants to speak, and I won't let anyone come in a second time until everyone's had a chance to speak first time round, okay? Right, Councillor Gocher, and after Councillor Gocher, if Councillor Robertson could be ready, Davison could be ready to speak. Apologies.
Thank you, Chair. Just first of all, a question for Simon about perhaps the first thing he said about something has triggered the new wording, and to do with us not demonstrating a 5-year supply. Perhaps if you could clarify why, what is that to do with the local plan? What does that mean? That's the first question. I have some other observations, but that's my first question, if that could just be clarified to the committee, why this new wording has been triggered. And then secondly, my observation on the wording itself is, as a former examiner, placing scripts in levels, it seems to me that it's based on interpretation. What is the difference between clear and strong? Which to a degree is inherently subjective, depending on where you place your priorities. For me, my priority is the strength of the concerns about the heritage site, and that's what teeters it into the direction of strong, in my opinion. But we are dealing with interpretation of words here, and that would be my interpretation. Based on what makes it a strong consideration.
Okay, Nadine, if you'd like to respond.
So, as Simon has explained, the appeal is currently ongoing. There will be a public inquiry starting in July, but there are documents that have to be prepared in preparation for that appeal. So the council had to do a statement of case, and together with the appellant we have to agree a statement of common ground where we agree the matters that are agreed and those that are disagreed. And as part of that statement of common ground, we have agreed with the appellant's point that the council is currently not demonstrating an up-to-date 5-year housing land supply. but that we are more in the region of 4.5 to 4.9 years. That is for the purpose of this appeal only, and that in itself then triggers paragraph 11D, where the absence of a up-to-date 5-year housing land supply will engage to tip the balance. But I can see that Simon wants to speak, so I'm going to let him come in.
Okay, Simon, if you'd like to add further clarification, please do.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the Abbrow site is an allocated site within the local plan, and it formed part of our housing trajectory for the delivery of new homes. Consequently, following the refusal of planning permission, that number of units fell away from the housing land supply, and we are left with a position where we believe that it is reasonable to hold the position at the present time that for the purposes of this appeal only, that the tilted balance is engaged due to housing land supply. The tilted balance becomes engaged where the plan is either out of date or in circumstances where an authority cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. In this instance, the plan is not out of date, but the consequence of not being able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply means that the spatial policies for the allocation of new homes become silent or carry much less weight, and consequently we are now left with a position where the tilted balance is engaged, and the consideration for the committee is whether you consider that the reasons for refusal, which related, if you can recall, to heritage and design, were strong reasons for refusal as opposed to just clear reasons for refusal. Clearly, there is a statutory duty to preserve the character appearance of the conservation area. There are not that many statutory duties actually in planning, so our advice to you would be the reasons for refusal are strong reasons for refusal. They are not simply clear reasons for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Councillor Davidson.
Yes, thank you, Simon. That one of your answers answered one of my questions, and in that obviously I'm looking at the 3rd of July 2023 when we originally refused it, and of course it kept coming back. So obviously we developed things. Can I just ask? We need to make sure that we have the strongest possible position for the appeal. We'd like guidance for that. Yeah, I know you've asked specific questions tonight, but I did know I don't quite understand why you just mentioned it. But the scheduled ancient monument, you know, the historic siting, is terribly important in our opinion, and also the lack of the 30% affordable housing, which was a strong policy for the council, and I don't understand why they haven't been questioned, or is it because the new MPPF doesn't change?
Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the matters brought before you this evening relate to clarifying some points which would otherwise be open to debate at the inquiry, and we need to ensure that, as the councillors have alluded to, the council as local planning authority has the strongest possible case so that we can defend those reasons for refusal in the most robust manner. In order to be in that position, we would need to clarify that you were of the opinion that the reasons for refusal were strong and not simply clear. And then, having regard to paragraph 125 in relation to brownfield land, which clearly the site is, that the reasons for refusal in effect do identify substantial harm would be caused for the reasons that have just been alluded to in relation to heritage and design. The second reason for refusal obviously relates to the failure to have a mechanism to deliver the relevant developer contributions. However, it does seem likely that an agreement will be made and completed before the inquiry is finished, and so that will probably fall away. But the particular reasons for refusal as set out within the report do relate to matters of considerable significance and weight in both national policy framework terms and in terms the adopted local plan, and they are policies which are not silent because they are not spatial policies. They relate to heritage assets and the impact of the development on the character and appearance of the area. Certainly the officer's advice to you would be that they are strong reasons for refusal, and that point one, therefore, whether the committee would have taken the same decision on the application in the light of the changes to the NPPF in December 2024, the officer view is that you would, based on the matters described by members this evening, or so far, have reached the same conclusion. But that is a matter for the committee to decide, and not officers. We need your steer on that. Thank you, Chair.
Is it, right, carry on.
Apologies to Simon and to Nadine. I'd like to be reminded of whether we thought we had got a 5-year supply at the various stages that we refused, because it may well be today we haven't, but certainly when we made the decision, that was not a big issue.
Simon?
Yes, thank you, Chair. No, at the time the decision was made, we certainly were of the opinion that we could demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. One of the consequences, obviously, of refusing is that some of that supply has now fallen away, and we do accept that we are probably very close to the beneath the threshold to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. So rather than waste the inquiry's time on that particular point, a position has been agreed between the two parties, so that particular matter should fall away and not be examined in terms of the detail of that. But the consequence of that is that the tilted balance is engaged, not because the plan is out of date, but because the 5-year housing land supply position is such that 11D is engaged as a result.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. I know the officers have highlighted for us the difference and the in what the latest update is in terms of clear and strong. And I've just looked at what the definitions of clear and strong are, and I think I'm very much of the view that it's strong. So clear is easy to perceive, understand or interpret, or transparent and unclouded. That, I think, are the two relevant meanings of clear. Strong is able to withstand force, pressure or wear, firmly held or established, and very intense. And I think when I was on the planning committee at the time that we were initially considering the decision, I would have been more of the definition for strong than for the definition of clear. So I would certainly be of the view, having spent a bit of mental gymnastics this afternoon looking through the officer's guidance, that certainly my view would be that our grounds were strong rather than clear.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Councillor Tate.
It's just really, if nobody has anything else, I thought that we've had a very clear explanation, so I was going to propose that we put it to the vote to go for it.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other hands, so is there a seconder to you, Councillor Arnold? So, just to clarify, it is paragraph 24, and you are, and I'll get Owen just to read the two out so you're clear about what it is that you're being asked to approve.
I'll do my best, Mr. Chairman. So, in the reports we have, yes, I've just got this, sorry. The numbering's slightly different in my copy, apologies, Mr. Chairman. So, we have section 1.1 and 1.2 of the report. Members are asked to confirm whether the committee would have taken the same decision on the proposed redevelopment of the Ab Road development site, Flagstaff Road, Colchester, open brackets, the site, close brackets, to provide 203 residential units and approximately 160 square metres of commercial floor space with associated access, public open space, landscaping, car and cycle parking and associated infrastructure, open brackets, the proposed development, close brackets, open brackets, under application reference 231297, open brackets, the application, close brackets twice, in light of the changes that were introduced to the National Planning Policy Framework, the framework, in December 2024, prior to the decision having been issued, and the Council's current land supply position, and, 1.2, whether the committee's conclusion that the proposed development was in conflict with Policy SP7 of the Colchester Local Plan, Section 1, carried with it a conclusion of conflict with the related Policy DM15 of the Colchester Local Plan, Section 2.
Thank you. Thank you. So that is what is being proposed. We accept. We've got a seconder. And therefore, can I have a show of hands? All those in favour?
Unanimous, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That is passed unanimously. So that deals with item 8, and we will now move on to item 7. And the first one is 7.1, and that is application 242-481-292 Ipswich Road, Colchester. Application for change of use for from dwelling and foot clinic to 10-bedroom HMO.
To ask the committee if they want to take the two items 7.3 and 7.4 on block.
Right. Thank you. The chair, the committee clerk has quite rightly pointed out to me that we've got some items where we have no speakers for or against, which puts you at liberty to be able to take them on block. So that's 7.3, which is Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. Just one item that I wanted to just draw the attention of everyone to in item 7.4, and that's merely the wording of the signs going up. It says, join other responsible drivers in Colchester, turn off your engine when the traffic lights are red. So it should either be traffic lights are red or the traffic light is red.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. So we're procedurally correct. Because you have now spoken on 7.4, we won't be able to take that on block. So we will take, we'll take item 7.3, which is 250301, the Albert Cowdery Avenue, Colchester, application for fixing the link information board, recommendation for approval. All those, yeah, can I have a proposed and seconded that is taken on block? Proposed Councillor Davison, seconded Councillor Pearson. All those in favour?
Unanimous, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and thank you for Kelsey for being ready to present it if needed. So we'll go back to the items we're going to take on the committee. So we'll take. I think because we want Councillor Pearson's comments to be in vogue, we will take 7.4 first, okay? So that is 250522 lamp columns on East Street and Brook Street, and that is an application to turn off your engine when you wait signs to be placed on 5 lamp columns in Brook Street and 2 lamp columns in East Street, Brook Street lamp columns 1, 2, 7, 13 and 15 and East Street lamp columns 7 and 10 is recommended for approval, and Philip Morton is going to present. Over to you, Philip.
Thank you, Chair.
I'm getting indications from my colleagues that you really don't want the report. You're happy with Councillor. It's a bit to your right. Saying they're happy. So is the rest of the council happy not to hear the report and agree with it? Can I have a proposer and seconder, please?
I'm happy.
Yes.
Happy not to hear the report, you've read it, but actually I have some comments about it.
Okay, so I will ask the backseat drivers to get back in the back seat, and we will ask Councillor Young, yes.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm just interested, this is in Wivenhoe, isn't it? And no,
No,
am I getting muddled
sorry,
up?
you are, yes, sorry.
All right, where
It
are
has
we?
been confusing.
Brook Street,
yeah.
Colchester.
That's all right.
I was thinking Brook Street, Wivenhoe.
Yes,
And when
don't
it said
worry.
non-parished, I thought, my God, it's parish. Why isn't Mark jumping up about this? And I thought the hate signs in Wivenhoe, the hate traffic signs in Wivenhoe, they won't accept it.
Thank you,
I'm
yeah.
perfectly happy with it in
Okay,
Brook Street.
thank you. I probably threw the committee by taking item 8 first, so I apologise for, causing the apparent chaos tonight. So, 7.4, Councillor Davison wishes to make some comments.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm fully supportive of anything that reduces the pollution down Brook Street, but we've recently at Council had a report back to say that actually it's significantly improved because already we've had signage on a temporary basis. But more importantly, that the Mersey Road from the St Botolph Road roundabout upwards is far, far worse. Why are we concentrating on Brook Street? Or sorry, I want to be reassured that we're going to have signage in Mersey Road as well. I know that's not a planning issue yet, but I think I'd like the officers to know that.
Well, thank you. I'm sure they've noted it, and I can remember from memory that the signs that preceded these ones were also on Mersey Road at some point. So you never know. You might get your wish, but who knows? Okay.
It's only people's health I'm worried about.
Thank you. Thank you for that concern. So, can I have a proposer and seconder to propose 7.4? Councillor Tate. Councillor Powling, are you wanting to speak, or are you offering to second? Second, thank you. So, proposed by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Powling. All those in favour?
With the grammatical unanimous.
Okay, so would you like the grammatical change, or was you just pointing it out?
No, I would, Chair, because I think I don't want the council to be embarrassed by putting up a sign that somebody comes back to us and says,
okay.
So that gets the green light.
So, Philip, yeah, you are willing to accommodate that. Thank you. Right, thank you very much. So, we'll go back to 7.1, which is 242-481-292 Ipswich Road, Colchester, which is an application for the change of use from dwelling to foot clinic to a 10-bedroom house of multi-occupation, HMO. And it's noted down here, amended description. So the recommendation is for approval. Presenting is Daniel Bird, but we have a visiting councillor who wishes to speak. So can I ask Councillor Jocelyn Law to come to the table? And you know the procedure, Jocelyn. Once you press the red button, you have 5 minutes, and a bell will sound at 4 minutes to give you 1 minute to wind up. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chair and committee members. Yes, I'm speaking on item 7.1 today, and I am asking the committee to refuse the application to change of use from a dwelling foot clinic to an HMO. I called in this planning application because I have a number of concerns relating to health and safety for those potential occupants of the HMO and also for nearby residents. Following my call-in, the proposal has been amended with a reduction from 17.5 to 16 occupants, and also some revisions including provision for a sprinkler system to address fire safety risk concerns. However, there are still key reasons why this application should be refused, which I'll outline. Firstly, parking. Friars Close is a cul-de-sac which is next to this proposed HMO, which already has significant parking issues from Milton Lodge Care Home, and also road users on the main road that park in Friars Close. This close is also, due to the layout of Friars Close, the end, there is a very tight turning circle, and given the significant parking in the road already, it's not uncommon that vehicles have to actually reverse all the way down Fry's Close to exit the close. So you can understand why residents are really concerned about any additional traffic in that close. I believe that the report on this application doesn't really present you with all the significant details to come to the decision this evening. So, for example, in 15.1, it mentions that the current site is already a busy foot clinic and has associated traffic, as if, you know, a change of use to HMO won't make any difference. However, I would like to point out that the traffic from a foot clinic, which has actually stopped being based at that site, that traffic was mainly in the daytime, whereas an HMO with, say, 16 occupants is going to have people coming and going throughout the day and throughout the evening. Also, the proposal for parking is for 4 vehicles at the HMO, and I'd like to draw your attention to the comments from Essex Highways, which are on a planning portal. Those comments are referred to in the planning report here, 15.9 and 15.10, and it talks about how the area is, the site of the proposed HMO is near the city centre and near public transport links and near public car parks. However, there are no public car parks nearby. There aren't bus routes on that section. And there are double yellow lines on Ipswich Road, meaning that, you know, parking is going to occur even more in areas such as Fry's Close. Secondly, I'd like to draw your attention to the impacts on residents in the local area. Obviously, we've got issues around the additional parking, but also we would have additional noise at night because, unlike being used for a foot clinic or general dwelling, you're going to have 16 people plus visitors coming and going at all times of day and night. There's also a care home next door, and those people will also be impacted. I'd also like to draw your attention to issues such as the suitability of the site for an HMO. There are supportive comments on the portal from the applicants who say that it's going to provide affordable accommodation for professionals. Now, the thing is, this application is going to be lodged. They talk about a property management company then taking on the site. So actually, there's no guarantee that this is going to be used, you know, providing that affordable accommodation for those sorts of people. We don't know how that site is going to be used. You know, it does bring to mind the sort of proposal for that HMO, the type of layout, that it may be more of a hostel type layout. But also I'm concerned there's no provision in that situation for any wardens on site or overnight. I'm also concerned about the basic amenities. Things like 2 kitchens for at least 8 people. Again, that could lead to hygiene problems, disturbances between residents, and again, there is no warden on site. So in conclusion, I'd like to say that a week ago this evening, I'll just wrap up very briefly. I was here supporting the affordable housing provision at Colchester Northern Gateway South site. You know, I support the provision. We desperately need housing, but we need housing for, say, larger households, 3 bedrooms. The applicants say that this site is too large to keep as one property.
Thank you, Councillor
Okay.
Hall. That's very good of
Sorry.
you, and thank you for telling this. I'll now ask Daniel whether he can present the items and address your points that you've raised once he's presented the item. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Application 242481 at 292 Ipswich Road is for a change of use from dwelling and foot clinic to 10-bedroom HMO. The site is located within a corner plot between Ipswich Road and Fry's Close and serves a semi-detached property with hard standing to the frontage and a large rear garden with detached garage to the rear. These photographs show the front of the building and its relationship to the cycle path to the front of the site leading along Ipswich Road and beyond. The site is within close proximity to public transport modes, including 2 bus stops within 20 metres of the site that provide links to the city centre and surrounding areas beyond Colchester. The site features a detached garage to the rear of the site, which is considered appropriate for the provision of secure cycle storage, details of which have been conditioned accordingly. This is the existing ground floor, which shows 5 rooms, a sitting room, lounge, kitchen, a utility and a lobby. Here is the proposed ground floor, which features 4 rooms with a unit to the left-hand side which is accessible for wheelchair users and features a dedicated accessible shower room as indicated in red. This shower facility was requested by officers following the completion of the committee report. Therefore, as indicated on the update sheet, this amended ground floor plan would be conditioned should this application be approved. The ground floor also features 2 large kitchens which provide adequate cooking facilities and storage provision in accordance with the Essex HMO amenity standards. The ground floor also accommodates a communal lounge and dining room with 2 shared shower rooms to the rear of the building. Here are the existing first floor and attic plans, which feature 5 bedrooms, 1 with an ensuite and an additional family bathroom on the first floor, with an additional 2 bedrooms within the attic space. These are the proposed first floor and attic plans, which feature limited internal alterations to the existing arrangement to ensure all rooms comply and exceed the nationally described space standards. 3 of the rooms feature en suites, with the 2 remaining rooms sharing a WC and separate bathroom. Finally, the attic space would also accommodate an additional bedroom with ensuite, which features roof lights to provide adequate natural light provision to the space. All proposed plans feature a sprinkler system at the request of the Essex Fire and Rescue Team to enhance occupant safety in the event of a fire, which has also been conditioned accordingly. This plan shows the proposed site frontage, including on-site parking provision. As you can see, there would be a disabled bay with buffer to aid access, which would serve the wheelchair accessible unit on the ground floor. In addition, there are 3 vehicle parking spaces which accord with the scales outlined within the adopted parking standards. There are no minimum parking requirements for houses in multiple occupation, therefore this provision is considered acceptable to support the proposed use. In addition, the site is located in a highly sustainable location with direct access to the cycle path and local bus services. Therefore, the proposal is deemed acceptable. And these amended details would be conditioned as outlined within the update sheet. Here are the proposed front and north elevations, which would feature no changes beyond the existing building. Here are the proposed rear and east elevations, which feature a few minor changes, including the replacement of first floor double doors with a windows altered to reflect the internal changes to shower rooms, and some existing ground floor windows to be replaced with brickwork. Owing to the limited nature of the proposed changes and the location of these amendments being to the rear of the property, the proposal is not considered to be harmful in terms of visual amenity or impact to the street scene of Ipswich Road. In addition, all proposed materials would reflect those of the existing building. The proposed change of use to HMO is considered to be acceptable in relation to the existing building and surrounding context. It would be located in a highly sustainable location and would provide alternative housing types for which there is an identified need within Colchester. As a result, this application is recommended for approval.
Thank you, Daniel. And if you could address the 5 points made by Councillor Law, thank you.
Yes, of course. The first one in terms of parking, as I mentioned in my presentation, there are no minimum standards in terms of requirements for HMO sites. So essentially there could be no provision of parking for a scheme of this scale and type. The fact that there is the disabled parking space, which does provide an alternative type of accommodation for people with restricted mobility and their own dedicated space, obviously that weighs in favour of the scheme, and the additional 3 spaces also enhances that. It is also noted, I know the points in terms of the impact of Friars Close, and ultimately if there is on-street parking, then that is detrimental to the neighbours. However, I would state that this type of accommodation usually attracts single workers, usually younger people, and with jobs within the immediate vicinity of the site, and they're aware of those restrictions when they come to take on one of those types of accommodation. So it would be made clear that obviously there was no parking provision explicitly on site for each unit, and the alternatives would be stressed in terms of cycle provision and local public transport methods. In terms of the impact on traffic, it was noted that Essex Highways actually consider that there is a limited increase in trip generation beyond the existing use as a commercial premises. I take the point in terms of the difference in the times of visiting. However, this would be a residential use, so there is no reason for why there would be late arrivals or differences in time and impacts in terms of neighbour amenity. In terms of the Essex Highways comment, the Speaker is correct. The initial Essex Highways comment did reference some points in terms of it being a central location. That was unfortunately an error, and there was an updated comment that was provided and is publicly available on the website, which states that doesn't have anything in terms of parking, public car parks and things like that. And again, they confirm that they have no objection to the proposal, and they think that it is within a sustainable location with good bus links, and particularly the cycle network, which is directly outside. The other point in terms of project management company, the use of the site would be controlled for a HMO licence, which obviously would be assessed against the Essex HMO standards. Otherwise, the site simply won't be provided the permission to operate as that. In terms of that, there would be conditions that would restrict sort of impacts and things like that, and if there was any social impacts to the neighbouring dwellings, obviously that would subsequently be investigated by our environmental health team. As far as I know, that covers all the points. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, did you address the point about the impact on residents in terms of noise at night times?
Yes, similar to what I've just mentioned in terms of the impact. If there is such an impact, there's no reason to believe that there would be any material increase in impact over the existing dwelling. It is a large dwelling currently, and I take the point that the immediate neighbour is a care home.
Yeah, just for the information of the public, we're changing over the microphones. You may have seen me take my hearing aid out at some point. It's because of the feedback that I was getting, and you've just experienced that on a collective level.
Sorry about that. Yeah, in terms of the impact to neighbour amenity, there is the care home immediately adjacent, but there is in terms of the assessment, there's no reason for that to have a materially increasing level of noise over an existing dwelling, other than the fact that the difference would be single people that are living in a larger property. I would also say that there is a level of separation between neighbouring dwellings as well. The closest one would obviously be the care home, but the other dwellings nearest would be the opposite side of Rise Close. So in terms of there being an immediate close proximity, it's relatively limited. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. We've got 4 speakers, and I'll take them first. And if any of you want to come back, if you could be patient enough to see if anyone else wants to speak first. Councillor Corey.
Thank you, Chair. So I will try and take my bias against houses of multiple occupation away, and as councillors we get lots of complaints about those, but that's not a conditional issue, not a material issue. I actually feel on balance that it is quite a sustainable development to an extent, internally and externally, and the work to ensure the disability accessibility there is positive. However, the parking standards for me remain quite an issue, and I can't believe we have no parking standards for HMOs. I don't see why we lack that policy, so that for me would be a strong direction of can we get a policy on that, please? So as a result, do we not apply traditional housing standards as if it was a traditional dwelling? Because it's a dwelling with double the amount of people that you typically would have in there. And if we can't get any further on that and necessarily object on that reason because there are no standards for HMOs, then could we not put a condition in place? Could we not put a condition in place on this planning application if it was to pass to limit car ownership? So limit, obviously there's a disabled space and 3 other spaces. So could we not put some condition that says you are limited to only offer it to 3 people with a parking space, 1 extra as a disability space, and then no others? That would be my constructive way of getting around this issue of parking. Otherwise, those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before I bring the next speaker in, to seek clarity on that, are you saying that we should limit car ownership for the occupants?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Spindler.
Hello. As a mother of 10, I understand how much washing is involved. And what I've noticed is you've got double beds here that may have 2 people staying in a room because it's a double room. You've got laundry from every single room there. Even if you've got a washing machine in both kitchens, that's not going to do the job. And wouldn't it be better to have a utility room where things can go to? It would save them taking it up to the bedrooms and causing damp in the bedrooms. I just think that a utility room would possibly be a better option within the building.
Thank you, Councillor Spindler. So that's asking for that to be conditioned. And Councillor Pearson. Beg your pardon, I'd missed that, Councillor Young. Apologies.
Thanks very much, Chair. I guess I had a number of questions and comments, really. One is about we have to obviously judge applications that come before us, but it seems to me that we have an awful lot of accommodation for single people as it is, and the need is for family homes much more than it is for single person accommodations. In Greenstead, we have a lot of applicants coming for us for NACRO accommodation. I would like to know a bit, if that's possible, about the applicant and what their intentions are to this site, because I think we allow a planning application and we actually build in problems for the existing community if we don't know who's intended for that accommodation. So if you have any insight into what their proposal or is, I'd like to hear that. In terms of bus provision, I hear what you say in terms of bus stops, but actually I've done quite a bit of canvassing up and down Ipswich Road over the years, and actually there is no bus service that goes up Ipswich Road. There's bus services that go into St John's Estate, but they don't go up Ipswich Road. So I think it's a bit, of a red herring to say there's bus stops when there isn't actually a bus service. It's like saying there's bus stops on Cowdray Avenue, but there is no bus service on Cowdray Avenue. So I think we have to be really careful about the language we use, and actually when we're putting that in an application and saying there is bus provision, I don't think there is bus provision, so I wonder if you could clarify that. You talk about the fact that it's, in your opinion, it might be for workers, single person people that are workers. And if you're talking about professional people, where we might have an aspiration that they're all going off on their bikes, I think they will have cars. And if there's 10 occupants, you cannot compare it with a large domestic property where you might have, 2 parents, maybe 3 other adult children, and you're not going to have 5 cars. But I think in this case, we probably will end up with 10 cars. And if we do end up with 10 cars, Friars Close is not an appropriate place for people to be offloading that parking into Friars Close. It just wouldn't be fair on existing residents. And I do think that there is the potential for considerable impact actually on the locality by having an HMO. I mean, we've got enough of them, they cause enough problems, they certainly cause enough problems in my ward, and I'm sure there are other HMOs in other wards that are causing similar problems. So you know, the illusion that an HMA doesn't cause impact and harm, I think, is an incorrect assumption. I'd like to see us reject it, frankly, if there were grounds that we could.
Okay, and Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. I do have some sympathy with the comments about car parking and the impact of additional adults living in this property as a result of it being turned into an HMO. That said, I think, if I remember rightly, and I haven't got the diagram in front of me, the property already has 5 double bedrooms, and you could have 10 adults living in that 5-bedroom house as it currently exists, with each of them having their own car. So, and we wouldn't be in any position to stop that from happening. And certainly I'm not hearing anything or seeing anything this evening that's suggesting there is a material planning reason to prevent or to vote against the proposal that's in front of us. I do think that Councillor Young's comment about public transportation and ensuring that we're accurate in the documentation that we put forward needs to be just carefully considered. And Councillor Corey's comment about, you know, needing to look again at parking rules or car ownership rules for HMOs, I think is something that we ought to consider if we have the power to do that. The final point I want to make as well was just looking at this. Whenever we have applications come up for new housing, and in this case it's almost new housing, should we not have a condition that an EV point is put onto the frontage of the house next to the car parking spaces?
Okay, Daniel, I've got one more speaker indicated. Are you happy for me to take that speaker and then you come back to the points, or would you like to address them now? Okay, Councillor Gocher.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow on from what several of the other previous speakers have said, on the issue of parking rules for HMOs, is that in Colchester Council's remit to set those rules, or are those rules national that we basically have to follow? That's the first question. Secondly, in the report it says that this proposed site is in the vicinity of several car parks. Could you let us know where those car parks are and how far away they are from the site? Because that's specifically mentioned in the report. I do agree with Councillor Young's comments that it is likely that if they're professional people, they will have their own car. And so what I'm trying to ascertain is, what is the parking that is available near the site that isn't actually in the nearby road? If those car parks are a long way away, does that bring in any possibility that we've got a material planning case, or doesn't it, basically, is what I'm trying to drive at on the parking issue. In terms of the site, I'll probably miss this bit, but could you tell us if those rooms on the ground floor have ensuite facilities, bathrooms, kitchens and so forth? It looks like there's some sharing going on the second floor. Obviously, one of my concerns is the number of people being squeezed into this building, but could you let us know if that is all completely fully compliant with national rules anyway, and if there's any space for any kind of not necessarily reasons to object, but or refuse, but reasons to condition or scope for conditions on the actual provision of those facilities, bathrooms, kitchens. Obviously, there seems to be an assumption that the people dwelling here will be professionals, and I suspect that some of the public concern is over the fact that they might not be those particular sorts of people. But I believe I'm right in saying that we can't either condition or refuse on the basis of the type of people the application is likely to attract, and that's, I think, something we just need to make clear to people from the public who might be watching. Thank you.
Councillor Tate, is yours a multi-layered question or is it a singular?
It sort of follows on from what Councillor Gocher was just saying.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. While I do share I have background in social housing for those of you who are not aware, and while I do share some of the concerns regarding HMOs, the things we're talking about here are housing management issues and not planning issues, and well, that's it really. I can't see that we have a material planning consideration here. And I certainly wouldn't want to cast aspersions onto the type of people that might live in these properties.
Thank you, Councillor Tate. Yeah, you and I share a background in social housing and I totally understand the point that you've just made. So, Daniel, would you like to come back to all the points?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The first point in terms of parking ownership, as the Councillor made the point, in terms of the standards, it is unfortunate that there aren't a specific requirement, but they are set by Essex. So our adopted parking policy is an Essex policy. So unfortunately, that's not within our gift to sort of request that to be increased. I would say that the provision is more than some other schemes that you do see, and in terms of the fact that there is the additional 3 spaces as well as the disabled accessible space, I think it is quite good. In terms of us conditioning whether they can't have cars, obviously that's outside of something that we could condition through planning, unfortunately. It has been made clear through the developer or for the applicant that it will be made clear that the use of cycle provision and also public transport would be preferential, essentially. But unfortunately, we wouldn't be able to control that via condition in this instance. In terms of the point, in terms of the utility room, I completely understand your point in terms of the amount of washing, etc. There are set standards in terms of the kitchens and also of the laundry facilities. I appreciate they are all shared, but unfortunately that is kind of the nature of the beast in this instance. The floor plans don't really allow for the provision of a utility room because this scheme does feature a shared lounge and dining room, which some other HMOs don't provide, which obviously does provide another amenity value to residents, which obviously is beneficial. But all I can say is in terms of the standards that are set by Essex, it does meet all of those in terms of the scale of the kitchen. The kitchen's bigger than the requirements, and things like in terms of the number of hobs and things like that, and washing facilities, in terms of washing machines, it does conform with that. In terms of the type of provision, all the information that's been indicated to us are that they will be advertised to professionals. Obviously, we can't discriminate in terms of the type of people that will end up residing in this premises, but that is the target audience that they are looking to serve. In terms of the bus provision, I take your point in terms of, and Essex County Council have actually seconded that they're not the most frequent of services, but the services do exist within the 20 metres. The ones opposite the site aren't as frequent, but within walking distance there are greater provisions that do go further, and that was our feedback that we got from the Highway Authority as well, which obviously run the bus, most of the bus networks. In terms of the EV point, that is something that we can do, presumably. We could condition that if members are minded to include that. Don't have any issue with that, completely take that point, makes sense. In terms of car parks, that, in terms of Councillor Gocher's comment, that was in reference in error from the Highway Authority, their initial comment, so unfortunately that was copied into the report. It was made clear on the update sheet just to say that there has been a subsequent comment in which the Highway Authority has confirmed that there aren't any public car parks in the vicinity, and again, that comment in terms of the bus provision, and that they, in their view, they consider the trip generation to not be materially larger than the existing use. So that's that in that point. In terms of the ground floor bathrooms, let me just go back. So we've got 2 of the bedrooms which feature en suites, apologies, and the remaining 3 bedrooms are sharing the 2 shower rooms. So essentially there's only one difference in that. They do come off of the kitchen, and they also have a WC incorporated within the shower room as well. Sorry, it's not going well, is it? I think, yeah, sorry, Chair, that's the end.
Thank you. Sorry for interrupting your stride. Sorry, but it's a lot better when it's pushed away. Yeah, because I'm not getting the feedback. Yeah. I just want to ask whether there's anybody else that hasn't spoken who wants to speak before I bring someone in, and then after you, Councillor Davison, I'd like to make a comment as well. Councillor Davison.
Yeah. Thank you, Chairman. I was keen to hear everybody else's opinions and points that it raised. I feel for Councillor Laws. I'm sure she understands the problems with parking in an unrestricted close. But actually with the local highway panel, you could apply for funding for yellow lines in future, but whether the other residents want it, of course, is another matter. I think I'm drawing attention mainly to 1511 on the report, which says it's consequently considered that a refusal based on inadequate parking could not be justified or sustained on appeal. And we don't want appeals. So for me, the parking really has been addressed by the extra parking at the front, and the fact that, you know, it's likely to go for appeal if we make that a reason for a refusal. I do fully support the extra laundry, and I did notice there's a large building in the garden, and there's no reason why actually that couldn't be a laundry room for 2 machines and tumble dryers for the winter, I guess, but I think that would be very helpful. I noticed that it's county council policy for parking in HMOs, but surely we can have a local policy. And okay, we haven't got one today, but it's something we could improve on, perhaps. So I would urge that as well. The other thing is just to note, and pleased to note, that there's a sprinkler system being installed, so therefore they should all be quite safe. The other thing for the planner, really, 16.1, it does say the proposal is considered to deliver much needed small units of accommodation in a highly sustainable location. That's not what we're hearing from Councillor Young, that we've got a surplus of small accommodation. So I just need to be clear on which one's right. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'm going to say something, and before that, I can see Councillor Laws is raising her hand, but I would say to Councillor Laws that this is the Planning Committee runs according to an administrative process, which is open to scrutiny. So whilst local members are invited to come and make their point, we wouldn't give them the opportunity to speak beyond them speaking to the council at the appropriate time. So I thought I'd let you know that, rather than you having to keep sort of raising your hand. So, yeah, Simon, are you happy for me to just have my say, and then you'll be able to round up? Yeah. Okay. So I largely agree with the point Councillor Tate made, which is that these are largely management issues. It's the way that the residents within the buildings are actually managed. Now, what you've got is you're getting a number of people in a small space, and as Councillor Pearson pointed out, that could easily be a one-family residence. But it's not. It's a house of multi-occupation. So if you had a block of flats where you had 10 flats, you would have a management plan for the communal areas. So what I'm asking is it possible to condition a management plan that meets some of the issues that members are sort of raising, whilst understanding that it has to be within the parameters of actual viability, because the provider of this home will be operating within a competitive marketplace. So it's about getting the balance about the way we would like to see those issues raised, managed by the landlord, because in my opinion, you wouldn't expect them to manage it in the same way they would a singular dwelling. Some aspects, as I'm pointing out, are more akin to the way you would manage a block of flats. So that would be the way I would address some of the issues raised. I've got more speakers wanting to come in, but I feel I ought to give the officers a chance and let Simon round up, and then you can have your point, or would you wish to come before Simon? And if so, why?
Chair, if I could just come before Mr Cairns, because I think that the question I'm going to pose is one that Mr Cairns may be able to answer. He may already have one in mind.
Okay, could I ask for your indulgence, Simon, and we'll bring him in. Right, Councillor Pearson.
Thank you. Yeah, it's merely, I know it's been raised either directly or in a roundabout way by a number of us around the committee table this evening, but that's the Essex standards. And I may be wrong, because it's been a while since I had to consider, or I had my training, but I thought the Essex standards were collectively agreed amongst all of the authorities involved in planning across Essex. So my question to Mr Cairns is, could we not start the ball rolling? We don't have to wait for others. Thank you.
Right, we also had Councillor Young asking to speak, so Councillor Young.
Yeah, I guess it was, I mean, I think what we had confirmed by Daniel is that there are no car parks, public car parks for motorists to use. Buses are a walk away, although there's bus stops. Actually, the regular service does not pass their doors. But I hear what Councillor Tate says in terms of our ability to refuse the application. I understand that. Like Councillor Davison, I'm delighted they've put a sprinkler system in, because I spent many a time myself on Essex Fire Authority and the LGA arguing the case for sprinkler systems. So I think they get big tick in the box for that. I'd like to see the point for charging, but I wonder what we can do in terms of conditions and part of that management plan in terms of restricting. And I don't know how we could word it to make the applicant actually deal with the issue of parking, because if we leave it and we don't make any recommendation or condition, I think it will just be they'll rent out the flats, the units, and they'll be parking in Friars Close. It will happen. That's what's going to happen, and I don't think that is fair. And we need to address that, and I agree with Councillor Pearson. We are part of the North Essex Parking Partnership. That is a collective in the authority, so we should be able to influence that policy.
Thank you, Councillor Young. So, Simon, if you could make the points you make and take into account what Councillor Pearson and Councillor Young have added to the debate.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. With regard to the points raised this evening, before I go into any of those detailed points, I would just like to remind members of the permitted change of use from a C3 dwelling to an HMO that doesn't require a planning permission of this committee for up to 6 persons living together. Now, this is obviously a very large dwelling, as we've heard described, and therefore could potentially host multi-generational living with a great number of cars beyond a normal sort of, 2.4 children type scenario. So I think that we do need to take into account the specific dwelling that is under consideration for the change of use. With regard to the the understandable desire to limit car ownership, I think that would be unenforceable. I don't see how we could do that, because even if tenants said they didn't have a car, they could park it around the corner, how would we ever know? I think it's a laudable objective and totally logical, but I don't know how we could enforce that in planning terms. There was an issue raised about the parking standards. They are our standards. Were Pan-Essex, but they are adopted by this authority. What they actually say is that there is no minimum, but there is no maximum. There is a maximum, but no minimum requirement. Now, that doesn't mean that 0 is acceptable. It does have to be taken on its merits for the location you're dealing with. So you do have discretion to some degree around that, but I think what the officers are saying is there are 4 parking spaces which, will impose a natural limit on what the site can contain in terms of parking. But if the highway authority had perceived that displaced parking would lead to a safety hazard for road users, they would have had the powers to recommend refusal. So whilst I totally take the point about it being potentially annoying for neighbouring properties to have on-street parking, I think the key point is, in planning terms, could we have grounds for refusal around that issue? And based on the highway recommendation, we wouldn't have grounds, Chair, to refuse on those grounds. Councillor Young raised the issue around the need for family accommodation, and as we all know, we have a housing crisis. We have housing need across all categories, I think. What we could say is that this is a very large and unaffordable house for a single family to rent, potentially. So maybe mopping up a number of individuals living together as under the same roof, but independently, could address housing need at the very lowest end of the market. I do agree we have no means of controlling the socio-economic demographics of those people. That would be for the market to determine. But there was a point raised about a management plan by the chair and other members, and that is something we could impose by condition. And I think that's something that officers would certainly support. Sounds very wise. In addition, there is a laundry room demand, and I certainly think in practical terms, there is, I think, space on site within the outbuilding to the rear, and we could take that away and negotiate improved washing facilities, which I think would be very logical. I totally take the point around that, particularly having regard to the current topical nature of moulds in rooms and all the rest of it. So let's go, certainly we could support that. But in terms of the key points around restricting car ownership, we don't think that could be achieved. But specifically, the management of the site is obviously something that is controlled by the licensing regime. But if you wanted additional controls through planning, the management agreement could be something which we could do by condition. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So it's about finding that balance between what comes under building regulations and what comes under planning. But the points about you wouldn't want people drying laundry out in their rooms because the walls would soak up the moisture, and then you would start having damp and mold problems, which is considered a category 1 hazard. So yes, so if we could leave it to yourselves to find that balance between that. What you didn't address was, and it may not be germane to this application, but to give members a flavour, is there scope for the council drawing up its own HMO policy?
I think we do have our own HMO standards, which is administered by private sector housing. And as you'll note in the report, Chair, the officer does refer to the fact that the proposal does meet with their standards in terms of the scale of the rooms and the on-site provision. I think, as Daniel described, some HMOs don't have shared communal areas, and this does have a shared living room and quite a reasonable shared kitchen cooking facilities. So in terms of the standard of the accommodation that is on offer, it all meets the nationally described space standards, and consequently it isn't considered that there are grounds for refusal are based around that particular issue. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that. Right, I don't see anyone else, so what we'll do, did I see Councillor Pearson twitch? No, right, okay.
I was just going...
You are twitching, right, okay.
I was merely going to propose that we accept, subject to the conditions that we've just been discussing.
What we normally do in this situation, for clarity, we ask the committee clerk to summarise what it is you're about to agree, and then I'll take yours as a proposal, okay? So, Owen, if you could just summarise.
I'll do my best. I'm not used to doing this. We tend not to do this in scrutiny panels so much. So we have recommendation to proposal to accept subject to conditions, calling for a management agreement for the sites. Would we specify to cover such matters as laundry facilities or
Yes.
parking?
We can't cover the parking, that's you know, it is about the way that they manage. So in sort of loose terms, we would delegate authority to the officers to strike the balance between building regulations and planning conditions to basically take account of the points members raised. So Councillor Pearson is recommending approval with those conditions. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor McLean, all those in favour? Thank you for that. A thorough discussion, and thank you for the local member coming along to express her viewpoints. So we now move on to 7.3. Would you like to continue taking that point, or would you like a break?
I was going to suggest if we could, it might just be me, but I've just got a continuous low hum and it's giving me a banging head. And I was wondering if we could take a break to try and sort that mic problem out.
I appreciate that consideration because it's bad for you. It's
terrible for you.
Terrible for me. Okay. So we'll take a 10-minute break and we'll come back at approximately 7:35. Thank you. feedback, although I'm still hearing some. So we are going to take item 7.2, which is the last item, and it's 250195, 95 Broom Grove, Wivenhoe, which is an application for change of use to small care home class C2. Recommended for approval. The presenting officer is Kelsey Oliver. We have a member of the public, Mr. Luke Mussett, who would like to speak against, and we have a visiting councillor, Councillor Mark Corey, who has recused himself from the meeting so he can speak as the local member, and Councillor Pearson is acting as my vice chair. So again, if you want to speak, indicate to Councillor Pearson. So I will ask Kelsey whether she will present, and after that I will invite Mr. Mussett, and after Mr. Mussett, Councillor Corey. Kelsey.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Just for the public watching, we're having issues with the microphones, and we'll sort it out as soon as possible.
Thank you. The application before you is 250195, a change of use application for 95 Broom Grove, Wivenhoe, from a C3 residential dwelling to a C2 care home for young people, which has been called in by Councillor Corey regarding the reasons set out in the report. The site is a residential detached dwelling located in a predominantly residential location. Here is the location plan. You can see the site is a large 5-bed detached dwelling with a generous curtilage positioned to the south of the site, bordered by a residential dwelling to the west and a public right-of-way footpath to the south of the site. Beyond this sits residential dwellings. The application for the change of use would accommodate up to 4 young people on a longer term basis and would require the addition of 3 staff members during the day and 2 staff during the night. The shift changes are noted within the report with the handover times. The proposed block plan shows the proposed 3 parking provisions to enable the third parking space. The existing fence to the private amenity space will be moved back slightly. The block plan also shows the proposed refuse and waste locations, cycling storage and EV charging points. Here are the existing floor plans showing the ground floor, which provides a kitchen, dining room, study, cloakroom, garden room and a utility store. The garage to the ground floor is proposed to be retained. And at first floor, the dwelling has 5 bedrooms, 3 of those with en-suites, a home office and a shared bathroom. And here are the proposed floor plans at ground floor and first floor. As you can see, there are no significant internal changes. This is solely to relate to the change of use of the building. It should also be noted that there will be no external alterations to the building either. And here are some site photos. The council considers that the use would not lead to a materially detrimental increase in the comings and goings at the property over and beyond what could be expected when used as a C3 dwelling. We understand that there are concerns of potential noise and disturbance which have been noted. Therefore, a 2-year temporary approval is considered to be reasonable to monitor the use. This would enable the applicant to demonstrate that the use would not cause material harm to the amenity of the area. So the council recommend that a 2-year temporary approval for this application. Thank you, and happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Right, so we'll ask Mr. Mussett whether he would come up to the podium, and you have 3 minutes once you press the button, and a bell will go off after 2, giving you 1 minute in which to wrap up. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'd like to start by saying I oppose the proposal because it doesn't sound good saying you oppose the idea of a care home for young, vulnerable people. So with that in mind, I'm an individual that opposed it, but I'm not the only one. A lot of the neighbours have also submitted, and I have to say you put together a really good report that was very clear, because we waffled a lot. But we waffled a lot because there was a lot of concerns within this proposal. To be honest, I'm not an expert on these, but it read as a really bad proposal. And Wivenhoe Town Council also opposed it. Wivenhoe Society opposed it. And when you start looking through it, the concerns that are there seem quite sensible. They talked to, and they did change the plan halfway through the consultation. And having been trained by the Consultation Institute as well, I do think there is a risk for judicial review, because we never actually heard any outcomes from the consultation. We asked a lot of questions and we got no answers. With our questions, we were raising concerns about things such as the fact that the proposal was that they would keep within the feel of a normal house on the road. But, so, so with that, they're going to have 15 carers a week coming and going from the property with a care home manager plus health and social care visitors. The car parking at the front went from 4 potential spaces to 3 potential spaces, and I think one of those potential spaces, even with works, is going to be blocked by a concrete lamppost. There isn't a significant drop-down curb either, and with all of these other little elements like the neighbourhood plan they're going to use, the one they used was from Colchester, not Wivenhoe. They then also stated that the children who will be based there won't be disruptive in terms of transport, because they'll be expected to walk to school. These are teenagers. That means they're either going to walk to the Colne in Brightlingsea or they're walking to Greenstead to the academy. It feels really much like whoever wrote this original proposal, thank you, didn't actually know the neighbourhood beyond the boundaries of the property. So we've got a lot of concerns here. So if it is going to be approved, we would like to know if it could be told to us why all of our concerns that haven't been answered have been overlooked. Additionally, if there is going to be a 2-year review, will you be inviting local residents and stakeholders such as Wivenhoe Council to feedback on how successful they felt the lived experience has been? And then also, it is young, vulnerable people. So we, as their neighbours, have a concern as well. So is there a way that we could raise safeguarding issues over that 2 years if they were to rise? I appreciate that's not a planning issue, but it is a council issue that we'd like to raise. Thank you.
Thank you. So I now call Councillor Corey. Undoubtedly, you know the rules inside out, Mark, so go ahead.
I get 5 minutes, don't I? Good evening, councillors. Seeing you from a different angle. So I think the local resident has made some good points there, Mr. Mussett, and quite frankly, in my objection, I state that I believe it's detrimental as a planning application to the amenity and character of the neighbourhood with this conversion to what will be quite a busy commercial use. It does not comply with a number of Wivenhoe neighbourhood plan policies, Wivenhoe 13 to 17. It has been objected to by the Wivenhoe Town Council, by Wivenhoe Society, and by the 3 ward councillors. And it has over 30 objections from the local area. We are not opposed to housing developments, and we are not opposed to certain care homes, but this one does stick out in terms of the usage and in particular highways. So I oppose this on a number of issues. So I'm concerned about DM21 and DM15, about being safely accessible and creating a safe environment. The Highways Authority in 15.2 on the report and 15.3, I'm the local county councillor and I live fairly nearby to here, so I see what the highway is like often, and it's quite congested in that area as it is already. Factor in 15 members of staff, and that's 15 members of staff. That's before you get visitations from other professionals from the county council or which other care providers, whether you get visits from family. So we're talking about a large amount of car movements here, much beyond what perhaps we were talking about on other applications earlier. This is not a sort of small care home with one or two nurses going to it with adult social care. This is quite different. So if you actually look at how many spaces are available, it's 3, and only 3. And the Highways Authority say it is only 3 that are available. And if you then break down the staffing, the minimum staffing of 3 plus 1 is what the standards require. So there are not 4 parking spaces as the standards would require, because they say 3 for staff and then a visiting space. That's not meeting the standards. But actually, let's look to the maximum of staff. So there's a handover from staff, which means there would be 5 staff there at one time, plus the visitation. That will mean 6 parking spaces are needed. That is without talking about the manager visiting, which would be 7, and that's without talking about any other professionals visiting or family visiting. So that could be over 7 cars for this site. So for me, that breaks the rules. You've then got to talk about, as Luke said, the vehicles for children going to school. We all know what it's like. They often would get a taxi provided for them to take them to school, because as said, there is no local secondary school, so that will be more traffic coming to the site. I'm also concerned with other areas to do with DM15 of the local plan, which is to do with noise and disturbance of light or odour. The way that this is now going to be a commercial use with a commercial bin to the side of the property along this residential street, there are concerns about that, and the fact that a commercial use means there'll be more activity with the bin, and that faces other properties. My next point would be on page 30 of the report, 14.9, the 2-year temporary permission is a condition. It's a condition that the applicant is not agreeing to, does not want to agree to. That's been stated in the report. So that is immediately going to be a breach. I do not think this is going to help. I don't think we can apply this condition and it not be agreed to. Instead, I would say a number of things. One, if we believe we need to do it temporarily, then clearly there's concerns about this use. Why have 2 years? You could reduce that down to 1. Also, residents are worried about, would there be a management agreement around this? Would there be a liaison officer? How would they input into this temporary permission and whether it needs to be adjusted? There could be further expansion into the 5th room that was talked about in the application. How would that be conditioned against? That will be more staff and more traffic. The last thing I'd say is there is a precedent. You refused, the planning committee refused, a similar application in the Burnham Grove in Councillor Young's ward on the 7th of March this year due to parking and amenity and safeguarding concerns. So it would be consistent for you to refuse this on those reasons. The last thing is that no fire risk assessment was in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for putting your viewpoints. There's a number of issues raised. I'm going to ask the officers to address the speakers' issues before I bring in members. So, Kelsey and Simon, between you, would you like to address them?
Thank you, Chair. Just before Kelsey, I think, launches into points of detail, if I can just respond to the point that those making representations didn't receive a reply from us. I'm afraid it's quite normal in the case of representations. We simply do not have the capacity to enter into dialogue with third parties making representations on planning applications. We get many tens of thousands of reps each year. Many of them pose questions. I'm afraid it would be totally beyond the ability of any planning service to respond to representations. The report is our response to the representations in effect and is obviously subject to public scrutiny and consideration by the democratic process. Thank you, Chair. Over to you.
Thank you. The existing dwelling is obviously, it's an existing 5-bed house and it's rather large, so therefore there could potentially be 5 cars if it was a C3 existing dwelling. So the highways have also not objected to the proposal, and they have issued a couple of conditions. The 15 part-time staff members, that it means that's not 15, obviously at one point, that's three in the day, and then a handover, and then 2 overnight. The area obviously is not restricted parking in the area. There is, the road is rather wide, obviously we don't encourage it, but there would be on-street parking as well. In the planning statement, it says that the care home would be Ofsted regulated, and obviously manager is there to make checks. Yeah, I think that was all of the points raised. Thank you.
Right, what about some of the highway points? It was stated by Councillor Corey there was over 30 objections, and I'm assuming that highways have been fully involved and they have stated their position, and we basically had no further questions of that. Is that correct?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as you can see from the report, they clarified the point of the functionality of the car parking provision on site in their consultation response. With regard to the ability of planning to refuse things on highway grounds, as I'm sure members will be all too familiar and weary with the fact that the National Planning Policy Framework only allows us to refuse things when the impact on the network or safety would be severe. Now, clearly there would be no severe impact from this proposed use on either the highway network or highway safety. So in our view, there is no grounds on highway matters to warrant a refusal. And indeed, the Highway Authority have confirmed that the parking is adequate in their opinion for the use. So to that end, we cannot foresee any justification on highway grounds to refuse the application. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, and there was a point raised about feeling that a 2-year temporary condition was too much, and that maybe a year one would be more appropriate. And also, when a review comes around, what involvement would the local community have?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. The condition actually requires a new full application to be submitted. So there would be full public consultation on that application. It isn't a foregone conclusion, and clearly if there have been problems, the condition is clear. It doesn't require the approval of the applicant, and if they are unhappy, they have the right to appeal the condition, and that would be considered by the Planning Inspectorate against the tests of necessity and reasonableness. And in our opinion, it is reasonable and it is justified, having regard to the concerns, the potential impact on the neighbourhood and its amenities, and we would defend that condition if so required at appeal. But it does not require their approval to impose that condition, and they could not just ignore it, because at the end of the 2-year period, their consent lapses. They have no planning permission, and enforcement would ensue immediately. So hopefully that has allayed your fears in that regard, members.
Thank you. So we'll move to the debate, and I'll call Councillor Julie Young.
Chair, I'm just trying to find something here. Where is it? Can you just ask, can you go to somebody else, because there was something I want.
I totally understand.
I had a letter, and I thought I got it in a tab, and
don't worry,
I've got to find it again now.
Okay.
Oh, here, I found it actually.
You've found it. Okay, go
yes,
ahead.
Sorry. Interestingly, when the debate started on this, and we had the contribution from Mr. Mussett, it triggered a memory I had of my final month in office as the County Councillor of Wivenhoe. And there was a piece of correspondence and casework I had at the time, which triggered a memory. And I've gone back and I've found that piece of casework actually. And it led to me making an application under reference number T13219346 for double yellow lines. And it was an application, and I'll read you a bit of the letter I had from the resident at the time, who I won't identify, and I won't identify the address. But we're talking about the very location that this application refers to. And it says, following our conversation Tuesday the 20th of April, we are concerned about the line of cars parked on the Spring Lane Brome Grove junction, because when the schools are operating, cars come in both directions and they finish up passing each other, by one going up onto the new pavement, which too is a safety concern for children walking to and from school. Is it possible to have some yellow lines with restrictions to make it safer? We enclose a photograph of the parking, which it makes very difficult for us to use our drive and get in and out with our car. And I think some of that might be related to parking for the railway station. So cars are parked there for a considerable amount of time, I assume connected for that reason. But it's just interesting that there is already, and this is April 2021, so there was already a concern at that junction with parking there, and which, if we go ahead with this application, it's going to add to the problems in that locality. And we have to take the evidence that we have before us, and this is an existing resident in that location, not 95 Broome Grove, but very, very close to 95 Broome Grove. So I'm also concerned about us going ahead, increasing the issue, which we already know is there.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's Councillor Gocher.
Thank you, Chair. On the issue of parking, again, my question would be, given that it sounds like there's an existing problem on that area, is that existing problem grounds for a material rejection of this or condition to do with the current parking provision? Can we take into account what the previous speaker has said and turn that into any material grounds for either condition or rejection? I suppose my in general thoughts about this, it sounds very similar, indeed almost identical to a situation I know from the village I grew up in, Stapleton in Leicestershire, where there was a very similar application like this that passed for a residential home for vulnerable young people, about 4 or 5 of them, and there were masses of concerns about potential for problems to do with both parking and antisocial behaviour. It was also on a bend, and in the end, none of it, or virtually none of it, actually transpired into real problems. There was a minor bit of thieving occurred now and again from some residents, but it was handled, it was managed, and so on. Very little antisocial behaviour, really. You know, my thought is on that I can understand why in some ways it is a good thing for vulnerable young people to be situated in places that are in what I would consider to be nice locations, like a village or Ivanhoe, which is a very nice place indeed, because it gets them out of an environment that might be detrimental to their well-being, and places them into an environment that is more good for their well-being. So in that sense, I do think in that sense that this provides a social good. My concern would be particularly about the parking situation on that bend. And I think it's fair, though, to say that obviously that the staff aren't going to be all there at the same time, you know, but there have been concerns raised about the changeover point possibly causing pressure points in parking. So what are the parking facilities available in those nearby streets? Are those nearby streets always jammed up with cars? If there is an existing problem, can that in any way form the basis of a material planning consideration?
Thank you. So Councillor Tate.
I always try to come into these meetings with a open mind, thank you, open mind. And I was initially thinking, oh, that's a good idea, 2 years, let them see if it works or not. I have, however, been persuaded by Councillor Corey, and if we were saying at this stage, oh, it might be a bit dodgy, so we'll put a little caveat on that. And I don't think that it's right that we suck it and see, want a better phrase. I just think if we think there may be issues, then we're acknowledging that it might not be the best location for this property. And it's just my opinion, but I just feel slightly uncomfortable with that.
Thank you, Councillor Tate. Councillor Spindler.
Yeah, my concern is for the children themselves, these vulnerable children from diverse backgrounds, challenging backgrounds, that have come into a house with 3 carers. That would be apportioned out as 1.33 between them, that they've got to look after the 4. So with that ratio of care that's needed within the home, and this home being very close to an infant school, if they need that assistance within a home, who's assisting them when they walk out of the home? And is this, are they capable of putting themselves in vulnerable positions outside that home without guidance? Obviously, they've said that they're going to be catching a bus or a taxi to local schools or whatever, but it, more the safety of those children and the children around there was my concern.
Thank you. Councillor Arnold.
Again, on a very similar theme, I see the road where the property is on the sort of curvature of an S bend, pulling out onto the road from the parking spaces. I can't see the lines of sight. This is again very near a primary school. Are we going to be having an issue with parents getting children to school over changeover, especially if there's a breakfast club at the primary school? Also, changeover time between 7:30 and 8 is going to be the same time if children are getting into taxis to go to senior school. That would be at the same time. So we could be having a real pinch point in a concentrated little area that doesn't seem to have a great line of sight from Google Maps, and that's what I'm looking at. They're my biggest concerns, and I can understand why the local residents are feeling very, very concerned, and definitely to have a condition to see if this does work. 2 years, I think you would know within a year, or quite easily, if it was going to work or not. So, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Chair. I understand and appreciate some individuals' concerned about parking, and we often have that as an issue. But I'd be guided by the experience and professionalism of our officers, and I'm not sure that that gives us grounds to refuse this. In terms of the 2-year approval, I think Mr. Cairns has already made it quite clear that when that's reviewed, it would come back as a completely new application. And we've heard this evening about concerns expressed around safeguarding of children. We're talking about a housing for 8 to 18-year-olds. So we're talking about children who are, and I'm making an assumption, and I know you have to be careful about making assumptions because of what it does to you and me. But I'm making an assumption that the children who will be cared for in this house will have safeguarding needs, and so they will be monitored, looked after, hopefully in the best way, and that that looking after will be rigorously supervised and inspected. So, given the fact that we're talking about vulnerable children, to just agree to this for 1 year, meaning that children who may need longer term support, I think could be potentially detrimental. So if we're going to turn it down, I think it would have to be turned down, and I wouldn't be supportive of a 1 year appraisal. I think the 2 year appraisal is probably better in that case.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson. Kelsey, that's the 5th speaker. Are you okay with me taking more before you answer, or would you feel more comfortable answering the 5 speakers that have taken place? Right, okay, we'll carry on. Right, Councillor Powling.
Yeah, I agree with what a lot of the councillors say. The only thing that I think should be brought up is that have you taken into consideration the Wivenhoe Neighbourhood Plan, which is the policy 13. It's got some very clear policies on this. Item, what was it? I did read it and find it. Well, actually, the infill and backland development of garden sites, a lot of that actual policy would be covered within this, about the loss of adequate on-site parking on the existing property, and it doesn't affect on-street parking. So what I'm saying is, would you consider the neighbourhood plan? Because a lot of time goes into the neighbourhood plans by these villages. I don't think they should be ignored in the slightest. And on the grounds of what Councillor Pearson just said, that if a trial is going, I understand what Councillor Arnold was coming from, possibly 1 year, but maybe they should look at that neighbourhood plan.
Thank you, Councillor Powling. Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, Chairman. I have sympathy with this application, and it's fair to say, even in my ward, I have 2 very successful care homes like this in a residential setting. Yes, the carers come and go, of course, but we're looking at perhaps ideally we'd have 1 more car parking space. But what it means is that at changeover there would only be 1 parking space in the street needed for that. Like Councillor Powling, Councillor Corey mentioned the Wivenhoe Neighbourhood Plan 13 and 17, and then none of those are referred to in the report. So I'd like to know because neighbourhood plans do have, they are material planning considerations. We need to know what they are. Whereas your 15.5 only talks about our city local plan policies, DM22 and DM15. So I'd like to know what those are. But it does have a 2-year restriction, temporary restriction. It is only for a maximum of 4 children between 8 and 18. It does have carers full-time. And as I say, in my experience, that's always been very well managed. And these people need somewhere quiet to live.
Thank you, Councillor Davison. And Councillor McLean, please.
Thank you, Chair. I feel we ought to give them a chance. I know there are special requirements for it, but I think with the amount of problems we have now with some of these youngsters, they need all the help they can get. And I think if there are so many restrictions by Essex County, let's give them a try, and then it can be, sorted out later on if there's any problems. But I think to give them a go would be, sensible. And we do need these sort of facilities, in the area. So I feel very sorry for them all, but, to just turn it down on not wanting people in the area or, living next door to them, I think is not a very good case. I think we should give it a go. I think it's tied up with the policies. So I think, let's see how it runs.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. So I'll ask Kelsey to come in. We've had previous planning applications, and the neighbourhood plans should conform with the wider local plan. what may happen is neighbourhood plans might become dated, so that may well be a consideration, but I'll ask Simon to specifically answer the issue on the neighbourhood plans, and then Kelsey can round up on the rest, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, very quickly addressing the neighbourhood plan policies with 13, which was referred to. That policy is wholly irrelevant insofar as it relates to infill and backland development on garden sites. Now, I really cannot see with any stretch of the imagination that that has any relevance to a change of use of a dwelling to a care facility. With 17 relates to traffic in Wivenhoe and has two criteria. The first is significant or adverse increases in traffic will not be supported. Well, we've got no evidence that the increase in traffic would be significant or adverse. And the second point is appropriate measures need to be taken to promote sustainable transport. If members were so minded, we could have a travel plan condition on this use to encourage employees to uptake sustainable transport, such as walking and cycling, over the private car. But in any event, as I'm sure Kelsey will describe, the Highway Authority are not objecting on highway safety grounds. They have suggested conditions be imposed in relation to visibility display, drops, curves, etc. Personally, I think we are struggling to find sustainable reasons for refusal based on highway impacts. As I described earlier, the NPPF requires such impacts to be severe on either the network or safety, and I would suggest it would be very difficult on appeal to try and substantiate that position. But over to Kelsey, Chair. Thank you.
Over to you, Kelsey.
Yeah, I don't.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we've had a pretty good debate. The recommendation is to approve. Is there any proposers to approve the recommendation? Councillor Davison, any seconder? Councillor Pearson. So if everyone is in agreement with that, Councillor Davison, yes.
Sorry, on proposing it, Chairman, I was going to suggest that it comes back to the committee after the 2 years for review. It may not otherwise. It's not a major application.
Right. I thought I heard Simon say that it would require another full application because it would obviously run its term. Councillor Young?
Is that with the traffic management plan that was suggested?
Yes, I mean, it's up to you guys to kind of say what you want. The officers are just advising us. So, Councillor Davison, I'm detecting you shaking your head. Would you like to clarify?
Sorry, if there are only 2 or 3 cars at once, I don't know whether that's really unacceptable. That's my problem. Mr. Cairns mentioned about severe impact on traffic. It isn't. So I'd take guidance.
Yeah, Simon, can you give a view on whether what Councillor Young is suggesting would meet the benchmark?
Yes, I think it would be a good idea to have a travel plan condition to meet, to satisfy Wivenhoe 17 neighbourhood plan policy. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Pearson.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I'd be more than happy as the seconder to include the travel plan, subject to the guidance we've just received.
And Councillor Davison, you're happy as the proposer. So, could you clarify for us, Owen, please?
Just went to a it doesn't exist. Apologies, Mr. Chairman, and to everyone watching on live stream. Yes, so we'll just get to the decision item. So we're looking to approve this application subject to the condition of the drawing up of a travel plan with regard to appropriate measures to improve sustainable transport use and to encourage sustainable options such as cycling or walking
Thank you. Right, all those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favour, I make it.
All those against, please show.
4.
Any abstentions? And the result of the vote, please, Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have 5 votes in favour, 4 votes against, 1 abstention, and so that motion passes and the application is agreed, subject to the condition named.
Thank you, Clerk. So, by my reckoning, that concludes the meeting. Thank you for your time, and apologies to the public about the issues we've had with the intercom system this evening. And I bid you all good night at 8:15.